Well, it's been an absolutely packed show today, hasn't it? We've had all sorts of things on the programme, from laughing gas to that really powerful discussion that I'm going to remember for an awfully long time about murders of women in the domestic environment. The week ahead, though, is going to be just as busy with that illegal migration legislation facing scrutiny in the House of Commons and the government's big push on antisocial behaviour. So now we have a moment in the show where we can take a bit of a look ahead, try and make sense of it all. We're joined by two former MPs, the former Labour MP, Heidi Alexander, now hoping to return to Parliament, and the former Conservative Minister, Alistair Burt. Lovely to have you both on the programme today. I always think it's quite interesting to talk to people who are slightly removed from the day-to-day in Westminster and, you know, can kind of kick back and talk a little bit more freely, hopefully, about some of the issues on the table. I don't know if there's anything in particular that you guys are keen to sort of pick out, but obviously the migration bill coming up in the House of Commons feels like it's going to be a really big one. Alistair, I'm interested to get your sort of thoughts on that.
I thought the UNHCR representative put it very well. The issue here is that this is a problem for so many different areas, and it is a problem because if people are forced to move, it's a problem for them and their families. And she's right that people tend to come from conflict areas and they go to the nearest available place. There are 3.5 million in Turkey, for example. We see very much the tip of the iceberg in terms of crossings across the Channel. Having said that, it's going to continue and increase because there is an exponential number of people. The UN itself calculates there are 100 million refugees currently on the move in the world. The United Kingdom remains very attractive. This isn't something, I think, that can be solved by one state alone. It does have to be done collectively.
How would you vote if you were still in the Commons?
Oh, I don't know. One of the joys of not being an MP anymore
you don't have to weigh up those decisions.
is that you can also admit more honestly, you don't know the answer to everything and you don't know what's going to work. Has there to be something that makes it impossible for people to cross the Channel and take the risks that they do and land in Kent? Yes, I think there has. That has to be done in cooperation with the French, and that has to be done in cooperation with others on the migration routes. When I was Minister in the Foreign Office, we worked on those routes. We spoke to people who were making the journey to try and persuade them, don't be with the traffickers. If you've left for a particular reason, these are the things that can help you. But it is monumentally difficult, and climate change is going to make this worse because more people are going to be on the move, and I'm not sure the world has really worked out how this is all going to be dealt with.
It's true, isn't it, actually, that these are huge issues that everyone is kind of grappling with, including the Labour Party as well. And you can see the obvious difficulties with what the Conservatives are proposing. But I guess also when you talk to Labour, more enforcement, trying to smash the gangs, I mean, that's difficult to do as well, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've got the worst of all worlds at the moment, haven't we? Because, you know, people who are genuine asylum seekers, who are fleeing civil wars, famine, climate change disasters, they're not being given the opportunity to rebuild a new life. It's taking ages to process asylum applications, a big increase in the number of asylum applications that are waiting to be processed under this government. But equally, we're not removing people who don't have genuine asylum claims quickly enough. So, yes, I think we do have to crack down on those gangs that are smuggling people into the country, and the Labour Party has put forward some proposals about using the money that the government have set aside for the Rwanda scheme and setting up a new unit within the National Crime Agency to work with other European countries and Europol. But we are going to have to do more to speed up the processing of applications and also probably reform the sort of safe and legal routes by which people are coming here. You don't put your children in a boat to cross the Channel unless you're utterly desperate. And so, you know, I think that that's something that we have to keep at the back of our minds as well. And when we're talking about refugees and asylum seekers, I think the fundamental principle is that I would like our country to treat other people as we would like to be treated ourselves if we found ourselves fleeing a war-torn country.
It's one of those issues where there is a clear dividing line between Conservatives and Labour. Another issue that we talked about on the programme where there wasn't such a clear divide was on the banning of laughing gas, of nitrous oxide. Both Lucy Powell and Michael Gove very clear saying that they wanted to ban that, to make it illegal. I just wonder, it's interesting, you were talking there about, issues that, you have different shades of grey on, which you can be a bit more open about if you're not in politics. And it feels to me like drugs policy is one of them, because the guys who are supposed to look into these things, the Council for the Misuse of Drugs, say that actually, you know what, it's probably not worth banning laughing gas. But then, from a political perspective, it's something that I guess perhaps there's political capital and seeming tough on. What would you say?
If you're in a position of making a decision, then you've got to have an answer, yes or no. And I think one of the problems of politics today, it seems to me, is so many issues are becoming much more polarised, and it's become more difficult for colleagues to talk roundly about something and also not respond in a very knee-jerk fashion. Is someone who is getting high on nitrous oxide, is that a good thing? The short answer is no, of course it's not. So should it be stopped? Yes. But how would you do it? And that is much more complex in a society where people have addictions to all sorts of things. I had a week in the States very recently, seeing the UN and seeing State Department on Middle East issues. And because cannabis has been deregulated, for example, it's everywhere. And you can smell it as you walk down main streets in Washington and New York and things like that.
No, it becomes a tourist attraction sometimes, right? Where people go there specifically.
Yeah. Will that deal with the problem by legalising it? No, it probably won't. So some of these things are extremely difficult. I've no particular view on nitrous oxide. I've not come across it. I know that the small canisters are used by cyclists because they're part of the
and in
kit,
Birth as well, right?
To get your tyres blown up. So
Yeah,
that's
so
quite,
what's your
difficult.
So my reflection on all of this, listening to that debate earlier, is that I spend hours every week knocking on doors in Swindon at the moment, and not one person has raised with me the issues of nitrous oxide or those small little canisters that are pretty ubiquitous across a lot of communities at the moment. What people have raised with me on the doorstep is rising levels of knife crime in a town like Swindon, where I think a lot of people would think that somewhere like Swindon is a safe place to live, and actually I was really surprised, having been a Member of Parliament in South East London, which had a big problem with serious youth violence and knife crime, to find similar things playing out on the streets in Swindon. And so if you were asking me about what the priority of people would be for action from this government, I wouldn't have necessarily said it was that. I think getting back to proper neighbourhood policing, getting enough police officers on the streets and investing in prevention so young people aren't getting drawn into crime is something that the public really want to see.
We're nearly out of time, but I just want to get... I mean, you're about to go back into it, so I'm not sure this is the best question for you, but what's the thing you've enjoyed the most after leaving Parliament? What was the thing that you've enjoyed the most about?
Weekends.
Don't tell this to me.
Weekends, because either you had engagements in the diary, and of course you worked through your weekends, or if you didn't, you worried, why didn't you have any engagements? And you worried in case you were missing something and you felt guilty. But the ability to think more broadly about things, I do keep in touch. I think the abuse that MPs have suffered is greater than it was. My wife still works in Parliament. The abuse that women suffer in Parliament is much greater than it was. The polarising of politics worries me a great deal. So I don't miss that. I miss not being involved in legislation and where things are going. But I'm also a Pro-Chancellor. I chair the council at Lancaster University.
So you're a busy man.
So being involved with something different is very good.
Yeah, and for me it was quite interesting because I went off and worked with the Mayor of London for 3.5 years, and so I was still very much
in politics,
an intense sort of political job, even though I was politically restricted at that time. I do agree with Alistair that not doing advice surgeries on a Friday evening when you're often there until 8 o'clock at night.
That's quite nice.
That was, it was nice to have a little bit of a break from that, but I dare say that if I'm re-elected, I'll be back doing that again.
Make the most of your Friday nights now while you still can.
Exactly.
Thanks very much indeed. Great to speak to you both.